Thank you so much, Sabrina, for agreeing to be a part of the Bangalore Literature Festival. And I hope to see you in Bangalore soon.
I would love to. I would be so happy.
Yes. So you are an award-winning writer with so many top writers who have praised you to the skies. So did you always want to be a writer, or is this whole writing thing like an accidental job?
Oh, this has been actually on my path all the way since primary school. I think since I'm 9 or 10 years old, when our teacher had us writing, little fairy tales. And suddenly I realized these stories that I have been reading, because I loved reading as a child. All these stories, they didn't apparently fall from the sky or had been there forever. No, someone had written them. And once that thought settled in, I realized this is what I want to do. I want to write. And that continued through the school career. And when I then graduated from high school, there was something very new in Germany, these creative writing programs. And that's something quite common in the US, I guess in India as well. In Germany, that was very new. And I
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. And I allowed myself that craziness of, not studying law or something different that was so useful. But I allowed myself to, give it a try to be a writer. And that's what happened.
That reminds me of when I used to write poetry as a child, and my mother would say, yes, it's nice, but she could never see the point of it. Like, it wasn't a practical thing. Like, what are you going to do with?
Yeah. And she's right.
Yeah. But Sabrina, can you share with us some story from your past? Like, you just said that you loved reading as a child, and sometimes we love to read, and our parents are like, that's too much. In Malayalam, you would say Pustagapuru, which is translated in English to bookworm. So I used to be called Pustagapuru, and separate her from the book, separate her from the books, because she's always reading and things like that. So, but could you tell me a story from your past, from your childhood, where you wrote something and it was like an internal realization for you that, okay, this gives me joy. This is somewhere that I want to be.
Yes. I think that's a story that links to my to the first novel that I wrote. Okay. It was about the story of of the Polish side of my family, because I'm half German, half Polish.
Yes.
And the story of my grandfather, my Polish grandfather, was very moved and very turbulent, in the times after the Second World War. And he used to talk to me a lot about it when I was a child. He was a brilliant storyteller. And I think one of the biggest drives to influence me of how to tell a story, how to set it up, and how to build it, construct it. And at some point when I became a teenager, I saw my grandfather getting older and slowly forgetting his stories and his storylines, like his craft was disappearing. And back then I thought, I have to hold on to it. I want to keep it. So I just took small notes. I wouldn't call it stories of its own yet, of their own yet, but I started to catch them. And I realized this is a way of holding on to things, and to maybe one day, what I did years later then, to pour them into a novel of its own right.
Yeah, and it's like storytelling is in your blood. And I think when you start writing and you feel in a good way, you feel that's your job, that's what you're here for, to carry that narrative forward. And only you can do that, because those are stories told to you. And you alone can, chronicle them, turn them into something flowing and coherent, right? Your first novel, Cat Hills, came out in 2010. So tell us a little bit about your first book. Was it, I mean, including, was it difficult to get published? And the writing itself, because, you know, the first time you're writing, you don't even know if it's going to get published, if anybody's going to like it or read it. So with all those insecurities and everything.
Yeah, I have ambivalent memories of this time writing the first novel, because it was very very insecure, and I had these very thoughts that you just portrayed, whether anyone will be interested in this, because it was like that I wrote about Polish history, a Polish perspective of history that is so close with German history, and not in a good way, and I wrote it for a German audience. So I was wondering, is there going to be a single German who is interested in a Polish perspective? I was very unsure of that, which made me sad, obviously, sometimes, because I was holed up at my desk, at my office, and thinking, what am I doing with my days and with my career? But at the same time, when I remember that phase, it was so peaceful, because I did not have my editor in mind, the critics, or any reader, because, as you said, I didn't know whether there would be any of these people. It was so peaceful and so calm and collected. Nowadays, I can hear my editor in my head when I write a sentence, and I realize, oh yeah, he's going to cut that out. I cannot write it like that. So he's in my head already. And I think, as a writer, or maybe you can compare it to different work situations, there will be never again this innocence and this aloneness with your project.
And after that, what happened? You know, your book came out, and then it gave you, it gave you the reputation of being a writer, and you could now go ahead and say, I am a writer. So, do you remember that moment?
Yes, I remember.
Because I feel a lot of writers feel, even after 2 or 3 books, they feel quite fraudulent, and they suffer the imposter syndrome, and they feel that, you know, this is it. My last book probably was my last book, and I'm not going to write again. And also, Sabrina, you wrote your first book, and you know your first book is a success. It's been talked about, and you're feeling good about it. But they always say the second book is extremely difficult, because the first book, you're a new person. There's no bad blood yet. Nobody hates you for being successful yet. So with the second book, it's like all the knives come out. So yeah, so tell me how you felt like you've arrived as a writer, and then we'll move on to the second book.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I felt all that, what you just described. I mean, you obviously know very well what you're talking about. So I was in a position where I had been offered a 2-novel contract. So when my first editor agreed to buy the manuscript, he gave me the freedom to be working on a second one right after the publication. So that was giving me peace of mind, because I was knowing, okay, financially I can continue like this for the next 2 or 3 years. This could work as a career. And at the same time, I was completely overreacting when it came to these expectations of writing a second novel, because I was at a position where I thought, okay, I'm so energetic right now. I don't have any obligations, no husband, no children, no nothing. I want to really show what I can do. You know, I'm going to show everything. And that was simply way too much. When I look at my second novel now, I'm thinking, God, what did I try to include and put in there? It's like 5 different ideas put in one. And now, a couple of novels later, I would always recommend to just keep it simple, and always think of the story you really want to write. You don't have to prove anything, and don't put a second and third and fourth perspective into it. Nobody wants to read that.
Actually, that reminds me, because I was a short story writer. I am a short story writer. So I started out as a short story writer. And in every collection, I would put as many stories as I could. You know, and then I realized, no, I just have to pick out in consultation with the editor, which he and I think are the best, and just put them, even if they're just 10. You know, but the tendency is that I've written all of this, and let me just give it to you at that same price.
Yes.
Yeah. But how was the reception to your second book? Did you suffer the second book syndrome?
Yes. Well, I think nobody dared to rip it apart. It was very, it was very difficult to read. It was difficult to write and more difficult to read. But because I was touching another historic topic between Germany and Poland, about
Yes.
a famous city in our, in our part of Europe called Gdańsk. It was a very important port city, playing a very important role in the world wars. So I was, I was just simply daring to put my protagonist and my story into this city. And I had spent half a year there. I had a scholarship, a residency program. So I somehow seemed to know what I was writing about. And I had the guts to touch that subject. So when I published my book, everyone was impressed with, with the nerves of actually doing it. And it was also quite a long book. I think people were impressed. Nobody read it. I would never write anything like that ever again.
They say that the first book gets written by itself because it's kind of running like blood in your veins and it's like dying to come out of you. But from your second book onwards, there's an effort. You're researching, you're thinking, what do I write about? And you want to go into different directions. And then it becomes stories that are slightly different from what you were dying to write. Okay, now you're looking for topics to write, topics you can connect with. So in terms of that, in all the books that you've written, would you say your first book was your most traumatic book to write because it had so much of you in it?
It's definitely a very personal book, but because I'm writing mostly about my grandfather, there is like a cushion of time between myself, the writer, and the topic. And because there's this cushion of time, it felt like a slightly more exotic place, of a fairy tale place, because most of it is taking place in Poland, a place which is much more, sometimes wild or very different than Germany. So I could run let my imagination run wild with it. I was enjoying writing it, actually. Right now, I'm writing a novel about two childhoods, about my
Yeah.
own, my father's. And this, in German, we say it's falling a bit on my feet, because this is much more personal than the book about my grandfather. And I can tell that now, because there is no cushion in between. It's immediate, and it takes me when I write it. And I sometimes really have to force myself to turn it more into fiction just to be able to continue to write it. It's going super slow. And I think my editor would like to have a word with me about this, but it is what it is.
All right. So let's just go back to your second book. How's it pronounced? Ambra?
Yes, Ambra.
Ambra. And what does it mean?
It's a very old-fashioned word for amber, for the stone,
Oh,
that
yes.
washes
Yes.
at the shores, yeah, from the sea.
So, like you said, it's about a German-Polish family and talks of displacement and the issue of homeland. So, how would you define home? Home, just the word home, in the current context of the pandemic and not being able to travel and being trapped in your own home, actually, sometimes.
What a small and innocent word, home, and how hard to grasp. I think it has infinite aspects. For me, as a writer and the person that I am, I think three aspects are the most important. One, of course, is language. No matter where I am, I can always find my way back into German, the language that I'm writing in. This is very important to me. And whenever I can read something in German or have something written in this language with me, I feel grounded and I feel talked to. So this is important to me. And The second aspect is very pragmatic. It's the family home that I live with my family in. I have a husband and two daughters, and we live in this house. So this is my home. We live here, and it's good to have this home. But I think the most important aspect is the one of childhood. I think never again will anything reach such an intensity and emotionness than the places, the sounds, the voices that you hear and are acquainted with when you were a child. So I missed Poland a lot during this pandemic because I couldn't travel to my family in Poland.
Yeah, and you have small kids.
Yes,
Right?
exactly. They are 9 and 2 years old.
Your third book, Tango for a Dog, it's a hilarious road trip through the German wilderness and is full of word play and wit. A 17-year-old, a teenager who fantasizes that he lives in the Wild West and not in Germany. So it sounds like a fun book. So did you have fun writing it?
I see now that I wrote this rather light-hearted and somehow hopefully funny book as a reaction to the second book that I wrote, that was rather gloomy and heavy and full of history. And I was, I think I was trying to get a bit away and stay in modern times and try to portray a region in Germany where I grew up, in northern Germany, where there is absolutely nothing interesting, nothing spectacular. It is a pretty plain region, but people have a very dry sense of humor and, somehow make their living there. And I wanted to portray that and set them a little monument. And I had the greatest time. It was very freeing to write that. And after that book, I had the impression, okay, now I'm grounded again. Now I can like freely look and wonder what I would like to write about.
You have a young adult as your protagonist, but it's not a young adult book.
I think it can be read by young adults, but there are many aspects that I put in there because I myself, when writing it, wasn't such a young adult. I mean, of course, it's been a couple of years ever since, but so I think when an adult reader reads it, can decipher all the meanings and in the best case feel something more profound.
Your fourth book, City of Gold, is set in the 19th century. And how much of research did that involve?
Yeah, I was, I was writing this biography about a German adventurer. I mean, nowadays you wouldn't necessarily call someone from Europe a discoverer or, someone who actually sees really something for the first time, because obviously they didn't. But I found it very interesting to find that there was actually a German guy who made it all the way to South America and, actually survived. And I wanted to find this person in the German archives because there was very little known about him. So the first step in my research was to find this person within Germany and to determine where did he come from and how did he grow up and when did he leave to South America. So I was spending lots of times in German archives and being in contact with many historians in the United States as well as in Peru and Panama, and to determine biographically who was this person. And the second step was, to get a feeling for the 19th century. I was reading so many travel logs, diaries, and letters from this time period, not necessarily novels, which are, of artistic value and artificial in this way. But reading these letters and these diaries allowed me to really feel what it was like to travel and to go on expeditions back in the day.
And what are you working on currently?
Currently, I'm working on a novel about two childhoods, my own and my father's. Again, always in touch with European history or world history in that sense, because the family of my German father was, after the Second World War, deported by the Russian army all the way to Siberia. A fate that I think close to 1 million Germans had to live in this way. And most of them died in Siberia, which is a very cold place, very difficult to survive. My father got lucky and survived.
Sabrina, I learned a lot from you. Thank you so much and hope to meet
Thank
you
you
here.
for having me.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye. Thank you.